a woman shook her finger at me. "You're nothing but fake news." And I asked her, I said, "Where do you get your news?" And she said, "Breitbart." And my jaw dropped because Breitbart makes it up. And I said, and before I could say anything, she said, "Well, I have to have my opinion reinforced." I said, "Actually, you have to have your opinion informed, and then you can go, wherever you want to, get the opinions that you agree with. But, what are the facts? What are the basic facts?"
Today, we're joined by someone who understands the media world not from the outside, but from the inside. John DeDakis is a former senior copy editor for CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, a 45-year journalism veteran, a White House correspondent, and the author of 6 political thrillers inspired by his real-life experiences in newsrooms and personal tragedy. He's interviewed presidents, covered major historical events, and now dedicates much of his time to helping writers process grief, find their voice, and tell the truth with integrity. John brings an insider's perspective on journalism, politics, and the evolving media landscape, and we're honored to have him join us today. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. And Paul,
great to have you. It really is.
Thanks.
It's an honor, really, to have you because, we've been following the news and covering it for a long, long time. And of course, the Situation Room, I watched it every day. Especially, I remember when the Iraqi War broke out in 1991. Were you there then, John?
I was working in Atlanta as a copy editor, and then when the war started, we went on a war schedule, and so the first night when the bombs started dropping, I was working that night, and that was basically when CNN became transitioned from chicken noodle news to the cable news network,
right?
Because we had 3 reporters on the ground in Baghdad, and all of the other networks were carrying our coverage, and that's when we came into our own.
Wow. I want to hear a little bit of the actual process of working for a network like CNN. I mean, Pastor, I think you studied some journalism in high school. I had a friend that worked for, I think he did some writing for the newspaper when we were in college. And then actually, and BC Begley, he does some freelance journaling for us that we feature a lot on the main channel, on Paul Begley channel. But John, I want to ask you, how does the actual process in the newsroom, behind the scenes with CNN works?
I don't think people understand that there is so much going on behind the scenes in order to get a story on the air. And with broadcast journalism, it's a lot different than print. Print is, you're dealing with sources, you're dealing with words, you're not necessarily as concerned about the pictures. But in broadcast journalism, it's show and tell. And so the information is part of it, and it's a fundamental part of it. But it's really important when you're able to get the video to supplement the information. And I can remember when there were breaking stories, and the newsroom starts to throb with anticipation and with energy. And most of the energy, at least as far as the desks are concerned, is to be able to get the pictures. And once we have our arms around the story, once we have people on the ground, once we have the video coming in, even though for the rest of the country, it's still sort of like we're just hearing this, the pace settles in at CNN, and it's like, okay, now we're just in our zone. We're telling the story. We have, the resources, and now we're just doing it, and we're just doing our jobs. But at the very beginning, it's frantic, just trying to get a sense of what's going on here.
And let me ask you, I mean, that I would love to have been there. So I took journalism, loved journalism. Wasn't a career path for me until now. It fell on my lap for the last 15 years by accident, hobby, and mistake, and the internet. But let me ask you, because when it does get frantic and the information's coming in and you're getting ready to go live, you got to go live because I think you guys, everybody that wants to be first in your business. Fact checking. How tough does that get? Like, are
Mm.
you sure this is right? We don't want to go out there if it's wrong. I mean, is there a frantic in that as well?
Boy, you pointed out something that's really important, and that's the whole thing about being first. And there has been a shift over the last few decades. It's certainly important to be as quick as you can to get the news out there, but what's more important is to be right. And I can remember when Reagan was shot, and ABC made the mistake of reporting that the press secretary had been killed, and he wasn't. He was gravely wounded,
Hmm.
but Brady survived for decades. And I can remember, I think it was Frank Reynolds was really ticked off when they had to walk that back because of the trauma that
Yeah.
it can cause getting it when you get it wrong. And so, it used to be if you beat AP by, 3 seconds, that was wonderful. The rest of the country doesn't care.
They don't
The rest
care.
of the country wants to know, is the information reliable? And
Amen.
so that becomes important. I can give you one more example. When 9/11 happened, there just happened to be a camera crew in the CNN newsroom. One of our cameras, actually, it was probably more than one, and they were shooting promos, just this is the news and
Yeah.
how we do it, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden 9/11 happens and we go into overdrive trying to report the story. And there was a scene where the camera is focused on Bob Fernand, who was the senior executive producer at the time. He was in charge of what goes on the air and what doesn't. And someone came up to him and said, "There's a rumor that such and so." And he says, "We do not report rumors."
Mm.
And that was journalism 101. And on the Tulsa bombing, the Oklahoma City bombing of the Murrah Federal Building.
Yep.
We one of the jobs that I had during that time was to monitor the local stations, because obviously they have people on the ground first. And so rather than just running with their reports, we were we were getting the facts of what they were reporting, and then I was feeding them to the desk, and then the desk would track down, is this true? And there was one allegation that was reported by a local station in Oklahoma City that, some Arab looking people were seen fleeing the scene. Well, if we had reported that, that would have cast aspersions on the entire Islamic community
Right.
falsely,
Yeah.
because it was a right wing, agitator,
Yeah.
a Christian nationalist, I guess, who was the bomber. And if we had run with one, set of facts that certainly sounded great, we would have been doing a grave disservice.
Right. Well,
Amen.
okay. So I love the way that you put that. And I really wish, from my point of view, I really wish that the news media still did that. I have a hard time believing that they do still do that.
They do. I can stop you right there.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
they still do, but they is very diverse right now. There are still reputable news organizations that have editorial oversight, that have editors saying, "Where did you get that? How do you know it's true?"
Right.
And so, the Associated Press, Reuters, the New York Times, Washington Post, the BBC, NPR, The Guardian, I'm just naming a few, but there
Sure.
are still reputable news organizations that you can go that are trustworthy. And so, but the problem is we have a president that says anything that he doesn't like is fake
It's fake
news.
news.
And
Sure.
that
Yeah.
and that and unfortunately a lot of people believe that it's just fake news, and
Mm.
people no longer know what they can trust, because so much has been done to undermine the credibility of reputable news organizations. And so what is ending up happening is either people just don't care and they're apathetic and they back off, they've got their own problems and they just go, whatever. And there are others who retreat to their silos where they hear the news that reinforces their opinion. And
Sure.
so we are in a vast wasteland right now, It's the Wild West, especially with the rise of the internet. I
Oh,
mean, if
yeah.
you've got a cell, I'll say one more thing. If you've got a cell phone and you hit send or you hit post, you are a publisher. But there's no editor on your shoulder going, how do you know that's true? And the problem now is the internet is awash with falsehoods. And it then becomes you, as a consumer of information, it's on you to be discerning about what's true and what's not.
Well, let me say this.
Yeah.
One thing I remember during the early days of CNN, I felt was really good is that Wolf Blitzer, especially, and so you were right there with him, is he was very good at saying, let me tell you what is happening. Here's the information. And I remember his tone of voice. And you could, he almost was like the Walter Cronkite of my days as a child, and
Yeah.
if Walter says it, it's the gospel.
Right.
Wolf was very similar to that in those early days of CNN, but that was a time when the news agencies, we didn't have this polarizing left and right, or if you don't like this narrative, you go to that one. It was better then. Am I correct by saying that?
I would push back on you on that. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I don't want to disagree entirely, but you got to remember back when Nixon was president, he sent Spiro Agnew as vice president around the country to talk about network news as nattering nabobs of negativism and an effete corps of impudent snobs, which is just a more elegant way of saying fake news.
Fake news.
And so, because the Nixon White House didn't like what, the Washington Post was reporting, CBS News was reporting. And now we know from history, looking back so many years, that actually they got it right. He was obstructing justice. He was about to be impeached and removed from office. So, and we do know now that they were lying about the Vietnam War. And it wasn't just Nixon. It was everybody from Truman on, leading the public to believe that the Vietnam War was winnable. Consequently, they had a draft and they were throwing tens of thousands of people into this meat grinder, knowing that it was a lost cause. They were lying to the American people, and yet they wanted to suppress the publication of the Pentagon Papers, which was a government report on the history of the war that determined that all these lies were happening. And the Nixon administration went to court to try to suppress it, and the Supreme Court said, not so fast, that's prior restraint. And it turns out that the Pentagon Papers were accurate. So, yeah, I think that that said, however, well, let me stop there because I threw a lot at you.
Let me throw something in too, to have to interject there. You're right. The Nixon White House hated the press. Clinton wasn't very happy with them either, especially when the Monica Lewinsky thing happened. And
absolutely,
George Bush didn't like the press either.
Right.
That's right.
And Trump sure doesn't like the press. Okay. And I don't know, Biden wasn't really around much to see the press. But here's what I'm going to ask you is today's news is so different because it's really not, it's gotten so bad that it's just propaganda. This is what's causing people to say, you know what, I don't know what to do. I go to MSNBC, I go to CNN, or I go to Fox, and I don't know which way to go. So now you've got all these parrots, all the echo chambers. You got all these people with a microphone who are so unqualified, who are saying anything and everything, and yet they got millions of followers.
Yeah.
So how difficult is that for the legacy media to monitor their way through that, knowing that there's millions of other voices out there now instead of just 3 channels? Okay, so
well, fair enough. And some of the legacy media is also reporting on the the right-wing media, and so it's important for people to know what other news organizations are saying. And so I think that's an important part of responsible press coverage is to to realize we're not the paragons of truth here. There are a lot of other voices out there. When I was at CNN, I retired in 2013, so I haven't been back there since. But even when I was there, I had a friend call me up from Wisconsin, and I consider him a pretty responsible, sophisticated news consumer. And he said, I tune into CNN for the news and I'm getting spun. What's going on?
Hmm.
And he was right. There was a lot of news analysis, and that was a problem because a person who wants to know what the facts are is hearing people spin it,
Right.
from their different points of view. Now, to be fair, the news analysis was coming from both the right and the left, from people who had been actively involved in presidential campaigns on both sides. So they knew what they were talking about, but they were also spinning. And but it's cheaper to cover the news that way than it is to send reporters around the country. And
Sure.
so you've got an economic thing going on here. And so I'm troubled by, to be honest with you, I don't get my news from CNN. I get it from the Associated Press.
Hmm.
I read it. I
Yeah,
read it
you read it from
because you don't
Reuters.
have to sit there and listen to people shout at each other.
Yeah.
You get the facts. I was at a writers conference, and a woman shook her finger at me. You're nothing but fake news. And I asked her, I said, where do you get your news? And she said, Breitbart. And my jaw dropped because Breitbart makes it up. And I said, and before I could say anything, she said, well, I have to have my opinion reinforced. I said, actually, you have to have your opinion informed, and then you can go, wherever you want to, get the opinions that you agree with. But,
Yeah.
what are the facts? What are the basic facts?
Well, yeah, actually, you make a good point, John, because I want to go back to what you said earlier. When you were in the newsroom reporting, right? We don't report rumors, we report facts, right?
Right.
But you kind of see this shift now, and I don't know if it's the reality TV era or clicks now. I mean, everything's clicks now, but when was the shift with, the three major networks and cable news, of really being more of a rumor based, I guess, or speculation type news? Like you see, it's a lot of talking heads and a lot of, well, what if this is the case, or what if this is the
Right.
case, instead of
Right.
presenting the
Boy,
facts.
I don't know if I can actually pinpoint a time when that happened, but I would say that the rise of the internet, and when everybody had a cell phone and could weigh in, I think that happened. I think one possible moment in history was when they got rid of the fairness doctrine, where you had to have, if you had a presidential candidate on, you were required to have the other person on, equal time.
Sure.
And it was sort of the equal time doctrine and the fairness doctrine. And they ended up getting rid of both of those because it was too hard to enforce. And so then it was all bets are off. Then Rush Limbaugh came on, and he was, he would read from the wires and stuff like that, but he'd have his own spin,
Right.
and he had millions of followers.
Yeah.
But there was no fact checking. And so I think that was probably the time when you got rid of the fairness doctrine and equal time provisions.
Also, when you talk about that, the fact that the fact checking, right now, every day when I get ready to do my programming, I search the world first. I start with the BBC, the Reuters, the AP. I even go to Al Jazeera, and I go to the Jerusalem Post, and you go everywhere. Probably
Sure.
15 or 20 different.
Good.
And sometimes if it's one story, John, I'll have to go look at 6 different perspectives to try to figure out, well, apparently this is what happened.
Right.
Because there's a lot of spinning going on, even in print. I mean, print's not as bad, not nearly as bad as the cable networks.
Right.
And I always felt that CNN was the one that stayed in the middle. To be honest, Fox is always right, leaning way right, NBC, way left, and then CNN tried their best to stay independent in the middle.
Right.
And that's one good thing, because I'd go there and say, okay, because there's a fact, there's an actual fact we can hang our hat on.
Right.
It's frustrating for us. It must be absolutely driving you insane today from being in the old school real journalism.
Not really. I mean, I still feel I feel I'm still fairly well informed. I mean, they don't pay me now to be informed. I just, part of it is just inertia. But I feel that I feel like I'm an informed voter, and that's really what is behind the First Amendment, is to inform the electorate to be able to make decisions about who to elect. And I still feel that I can find the information that I need, that I trust, that I can make decisions on. And I for 45 years, I was a registered independent. My kids did not know how I voted. And to be honest, I voted both Republican and Democrat.
Yeah.
I really have not been a partisan for my entire journalism career. In fact, it's a firing offense to be a partisan at a reputable news organizations. We were not allowed to donate to political parties. We were not allowed to have bumper stickers promoting one candidate or another, or yard signs or stuff like that, because you wanted to have your information be trustworthy. And I think
Right.
that at reputable news organizations, they still have those standards and practices that are in play. And so it doesn't drive me as nuts. What drives me nuts is the lies that are coming out of the Oval Office. That's what drives me nuts.
Yeah.
That's what drives me nuts, because we have, 70 million people voted for Donald Trump, and he's a liar. I'm sorry, he's a liar. That's just demonstrably true.
Well,
He exaggerates. He exaggerates
I'm sure
sometimes.
he's not the only president that's been a liar. I mean,
Every president is told a
always.
lie. This
That's
guy,
right.
this guy has, the Nobel Liar Award. You know what I'm saying? He is. There is no one who's done it better than him.
Now, let me ask you a question, and Paul, and real quick.
Yeah, you're
and
good.
that's the 2000 election. George Bush, Al Gore. You were at CNN then, okay?
Right.
How in the world did you guys deal with the hanging chads and who won the election? And every network had to be wanting to say, we have a winner.
We did. We declared Gore the winner, and we had to walk it back.
How did that feel, and what did that mean, and what brought you guys to that point to make that call? Who made that call? How does that work?
I don't know the answer to that, but I think it was. Look, there was, if I remember correctly, there was an organization that all of the networks relied on as sort of the clearinghouse for voting. But we all had our in-house experts. We all had exit polls. There was a lot of statistical analysis that was going on, and so in many cases, everybody had access to the same information. And you'll have to remember that it was W actually called Al Gore to concede, and then had to call him back and say, well, not so fast. And so everybody was in that state of confusion.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, well, we have to walk this back, and now it's a matter of wait and see. And if I remember correctly, it was at least a month of uncertainty.
Yep.
And as it turns out, and this kind of rubs a lot of people the wrong way, the Supreme Court ended up making the decision. The Supreme Court declared the election. And without it actually having been, without those recounts actually having, gone through, all the way through in that process.
Is that partly because the Supreme Court realized, look, the country can't stay in this state of indecision, and at some point somebody's just got to call it?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think that the answer is out there. I know that they were up on a deadline in terms of, the Constitution requires that the election has to be certified by a specific date. And I may be wrong on this, but I think that they determined that the recount wouldn't be able to happen in enough time to certify it. And there were competing lawsuits that had been brought to the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court made the call based on the lawsuits that had been brought.
Very good.
So I want to shift gears real quick, John, and because this is something that I kind of notice a lot with, and we talked about the distinction already between print and cable news when you're watching it. How much of, and I don't know before 2013 if this was really so much the case as kind of what you see now. How much of the news that's reported on CNN, MSNBC, Fox is, I guess, motivated or determined by lobbyists, corporate sponsors? And what I mean by that is, when you see a story spun or buried? Is any of that actually influenced by corporate sponsors?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And I could be proved wrong on that, but in most newsrooms, there's a firewall between sponsors and the news coverage. And so I would say, generally speaking, not so much.
John,
Yeah.
let me say something. During the pandemic, every day this is brought to you by Pfizer. I mean,
Oh, sure. Oh, but they're paying They're paying for ads.
Cooper said it, and here's why this is important. Half the country did not want to take the vaccine.
Right.
Half of them did.
Right.
And the aftermath of that, of course, has been not only the deaths that died from the virus anyway, but from the vaccine damage. And so when the news pushes by Pfizer, and when every doctor that people went to was being paid to make sure of that, I mean, this became a very serious thing in a gray area where people were looking for truth. I remember myself saying,
Right.
man, can I just find the truth of this? Is this helping us? Will this prevent me from getting sick? Will I get sick from it? Because people said they did, there was some blood clots. So how do you feel about that? Because you are right. In your day, I never did see a sponsor on news, but I have seen it in the last 5-6 years, and from both left and right, I've seen it.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a lot in there.
I know. I threw a lot in that. I know.
I mean, sponsors pay money to have their ads on the air, and so I think what you're implying is that if you report something that pisses off a sponsor,
Yes.
you're going to lose that income.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably more of a problem at the local level, where a newspaper is very hand to mouth to begin with, and maybe family owned, and
That's
so
true.
Mr. Big goes, we're going to kill that story. I really don't think it's that big a problem at the network level, at the major level. I could be wrong, but that's just my impression is that that's not the case. You're right. The vaccine issue was hyper politicized.
Yes.
Remember who was president then?
Trump pushing his warp speed, which drove me.
Oh my
nuts.
God! How
whoever
about
heard of a
bleach? Let's inject bleach.
Whoever heard of a vaccine being perfected in 9 months when it takes 10 and 12 years?
Exactly. That was one of the cautions that was raised, and rightly so, because it was sort of a risk benefit analysis kind of thing. And fortunately, you had at least a couple of vaccine companies in competition with each other,
Yes.
to try to come up with something that would work.
Right.
And to a certain extent, it was a high risk, high gamble thing, because not to have something was just as dangerous as to possibly have something that was going to cause a lot of problems. I think, though, that history has shown that the vaccines probably saved a hell of a lot more lives.
I'm not so sure about that, John. I'm
well, okay. I mean, that's not my area of expertise.
I went to the VAERS and I checked all of the injured, the blood clots, the turbo cancer, and I'm not saying it from the right people or the left, which way they want to go. It's just a factual thing if you look at the real numbers that were reported on VAERS. And that's what and only about 30% of people actually report on VAERS.
Tell me what VAERS is.
VAERS is whenever there's let's say there's a vaccine situation where a person is either went into cardiac arrest, sudden death or fallen dead everywhere, or blood clots, or autism, or some kind of paralyzed or face drooping, all kinds of stuff. It gets reported onto this
adverse reporting,
right,
for vaccine injuries.
Yeah, and when you look at before and then you look at what happened after, it's outrageously off the charts. And the numbers of cancers and all of these other diseases just went off the charts. Could it have been that the virus caused some of that? Yes, but in some cases, when you look at the comparison, it was off the charts, and that's something that nobody wants to report, because if you're on the right, if you're Trump, you don't want to report that because you're the king of warp speed. If you're on the left, you don't want to report that because you were heavily sponsored by Johnson & Johnson and the rest of these guys. So what happened was this got buried to the American public. So next time there's a virus, and this is why truth is so important. Who do we trust? Who do we ask?
Well, again, I don't know what VAERS is, and I don't know if the medical community considers VAERS reliable or not. Is
They're
this
the ones that
a
turn it in.
standard? Is this a standard thing within across the medical community?
Yes, it is.
So
Okay.
let me answer it real quick for you, John. So VAERS, I can look up what the actual acronym of it is. Let me VAERS. But essentially, this is they're the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Now, this is used in the medical community, and it, like Pastor's saying, I don't know the exact number or percentage of how many actually go unreported, but this is the standard form that's used in the medical community, CDC, HHS, for vaccine injuries and or not just injuries, just adverse effects of, hey, I got some swelling, or hey, I had, low-level allergic reaction for it. I forgot.
Well, I don't want to make this about this subject because John has been a great asset in the news agencies.
Yeah.
And he worked in a time. And he's written some books that I'm excited about that I have not read that I would like to know about too. So I just want to say I didn't jump in there to blow that up as a big deal.
Sure. Well, and I kind of pushed back because this is not my area of expertise, and I was no longer a working journalist when the COVID hit. So
thank God.
And I know it's very controversial.
Yeah.
I got the vaccine. I survived. I'm happy.
Right. Well, so let me shift gears then. So John, let me ask about the rise of AI now. Actually, not only just AI, but also freelance journalism. How are these two things, they all kind of work together, but how are these two things changing how, I guess, legacy or old school media and reporting and journalism used to work? Big question, huge question.
Well, AI is here to stay.
Yeah.
It's here to stay, and it's morally neutral. It's just there. It's the same as the internet. The internet is not evil. It's just there. It's what you do with it.
Cool.
And I think that that's pretty much the case with artificial intelligence as well. I think that there are, things that it can do that are wonderful and will advance society. And there are things that people can do with it to manipulate the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Deep fakes, making politicians look and say things that never were true, but they're so effective you can mislead an entire populace. You've got chat companions that have advised teenagers to kill themselves as part of their therapy. There are all kinds of problems, but it's here to stay. And right now it's the Wild West. It's not in any way regulated. And so the sky is the limit, or the depths, you can't go deep enough, into the evil. I mean, it's just, it's a problem, but it's an opportunity.
Well, can I ask you that? Because you said the phrase, and I think that's what you said, it's morally neutral. Are you talking about the AI itself is morally neutral?
I'm talking about, the technology.
Yeah.
The morals come into it in terms of what people do with it. It's like, I can remember when radio came out and television, it was, like evil personified. Well, no, it's what you do with it. It's the kind of programming that you put on. And so I think that the technology itself can be used for good or ill.
Well, I don't know how much of this you know about, but I guess what I'm trying to get to is, do you think that the programmers of the AI can sway the AI's morality? And what I mean by that is, a lot of the AI, right, is I forgot who we interviewed before, Pastor. It was like, AI is just a reflection of what is already out there.
Well, we interviewed the guy that works with Elon Musk and was in the White House for 4 days. John, the AI guy, we can't give his name.
Right.
And it is what you feed it. You are what you eat.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, it basically, sucks up all the information that's out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some lawsuits right now copyright infringement because it takes people's novels and it basically trains it trains AI. AI is trained on uh, copyrighted material, and so there's some lawsuits that are challenging that because that's basically stealing
Yeah.
private information.
Going back to just the beginning of the conversation as well. So now you have freelance journalism, AI, and you can manipulate AI as well. How much more difficult is it? I don't even know if you have an answer for this, but it just seems so much more difficult to actually find what's truth and what isn't truth. When before you probably had, I'm sure you had a set, checklist of actually fact checking things. But now everybody's racing to get the first story out. Things are manipulated. It's hard to tell a lot with the deep fakes what's real and what isn't real. What's your advice, John? What sort of lane do we need to stay in, or is there any sort of roadmap to find out what's real? Even
I think I alluded to this in the beginning. It really comes down to trust. What sources do you trust? Now, you mentioned freelance journalism.
Yeah.
Some freelancers are still selling their stories to reputable news organizations that have fact checkers. And if you're just a freelancer coming out of the blue, a news organization is going to be a little skeptical about relying on you. Um, I would encourage people to go to spj.org. It's the Society of Professional Journalists organization, and they have standards for reputable journalism. And it's very exhaustive standards that are used. And news organizations, the reputable ones, adhere to those. And so I think that it's all about discernment, and
Yep.
I like what Paul Senior said about checking other sources and not just one source, because uh, uh, you can see stuff on the internet and it's going, whoa, man, that's so amazing, but is anybody else reporting it? If they're
Right.
not,
There's
chances are it's not so sure.
Right.
And so yeah, read widely and all of that. I mean, look, if you're only getting your news from Fox, then you probably don't know that the network had to pay $750 million in fines
yeah.
because they continued to parrot the lie that Trump won the election, and he didn't. And yet they've claimed that Dominion voting systems changed the votes, and that's just not true.
Never proved.
And Dominion won in court, and the jury, which is nonpartisan, that's part of the jury selection process is to make sure that these people are going to play it straight, and you have to come, they have to come to a decision. And, but did Fox report on the number? No, they reported on it once. $740,000. And if you only get your news from Fox, you don't know that. All you know is that Trump won the election and but it was rigged in favor of Biden. It's not true. But if that's where you're only getting your news, then that's your bubble.
That becomes a problem, doesn't it? Whenever
It sure does.
one side or the other with that's the only place you stay, and you don't look and listen to every. You have
Right.
to. You have to actually get several different opinions to
I
figure out.
really think that's really
Yeah.
important, and that's true with anonymous sources. Anonymous sources are important for journalism, but I mean, just to give you an example, deep throat. We all know the term. It
Yeah.
was, that was fundamental for toppling the Nixon presidency.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that is that nothing that Deep Throat told to Bob Woodward was used. All he was doing was pointing Woodward in the right direction to confirm the information. And when when you've got a reliable source like that, he was the assistant director of the FBI. He wasn't just some Yahoo making stuff up. He knew where you could get the information, and so what you had to do was to verify the information elsewhere. get people on the record. And that's eventually how they got the facts.
Okay. Paul, you have in here also to talk about grief, how his sister's suicide and his son's overdose changed you.
Yeah.
This is a very personal question, it's a very tough one. And how did these things affect you, or if you want to elaborate on that some?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's something that undergirds all the writing that I do. I do a lot of speaking on this. I teach a class on how to write and how to use writing as a way to heal. And it's not something that I set out to do, but I mean, my books have been in print for 20 years, and the very first novel, Fast Track, deals with two traumatic experiences that I had. One was when I was 9 years old and witnessed a car train collision that killed 3 people, including a kid my age. And so that, at a young age kind of gets you oriented to your own mortality.
Right.
And then my sister took her life in 1980. And so when I started writing fiction 15 years later, I took those two incidents and brought them to the surface as I wrote from a place of personal pain and grief and poured that into the first novel. And since I write as a series, my protagonist is dealing with grief and loss, so that by the time Bullet in the Chamber comes along, my fourth novel, my son had gone missing for a week, was found dead in my car of an accidental heroin overdose. And so, I went through grief counseling, and eventually I wrote Bullet in the Chamber. And the reason I wrote the book is that I felt that if the cops could make the connection between the drug dealer and the fatal overdose, they should charge this guy with second-degree murder, because it's like selling a pistol with one bullet in the chamber to someone is going to play Russian roulette and you don't care. I found out it during my research, it's not a slam dunk. It's not easy for the cops to make that connection. But I took that collateral damage and poured it into my protagonist's life. And so now I look back on 20 years and 6 political thrillers and see how grief and loss and journalism undergird all of the stories, because I write what I know. And I've been sort of processing my grief, because writing, I've found, is therapeutic and cathartic.
Yeah. And that's thanks for
amazing.
sharing that with us, John. Those are two things I can't even imagine. I haven't gone through that. I hopefully never have to go through that. And I find that moving, really, that you found a way for self-therapy, some self-help to express those things and feelings through writing. There's also another thing that was interesting about your writing that I don't think is very common, is that you actually write as a female protagonist.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
Can you kind of tell us? Yeah,
sure. My protagonist, Lark Chadwick, is in her 20s, and I'm not either. I'm not young, and I'm not a female.
Right.
And I really didn't start out to do that in any kind of calculated way. It's just that when I started writing fiction, someone suggested that I should write in a way that stretches who I am.
Yeah.
Never been a woman,
Wow.
at least not in this life. So I gave it a try, and I discovered that emotions are not gender specific. We all have the exact same emotions. It's just that in my experience, it's the women in my life who are more willing to share their emotions, and they're more articulate about the emotions they share. And so, and then I worked at CNN for 25 years, surrounded by young women in their early to mid 20s who would let me ask them questions about what it's like to be a woman, and what their jobs were like, their careers, their boyfriends, their families. And I learned a lot. We guys can learn a lot from listening to women and the women in our lives.
Boy, yeah.
There was one anchor I worked with. She was gorgeous. And I remember asking her, what's it like for guys to come on to you all the time? And she said, I can tell in the first 20 seconds if I'm safe. I never have to worry about being safe in a conversation with a woman. And that's when I realized that being a woman means playing defense. Yeah. And that was just one little nugget that I picked up. Women are fascinating. And so it's been fun to write Lark.
Wow. Well, very true too. The safety key to women is that's one of their number one things is how at every situation is it safe? Am I safe? Is
Hmm.
he safe? Yeah, it is, and I guess men, from our perspective, we feel the more dominant role. We're the protectors usually, and we also are the ones that we scout the room. Is there any threat here? Not that we're scared of it, but should I deal with it? Okay, and
Yeah.
that's another mindset. But
Well, unfortunately, a lot of guys troll the room looking for, who's hot and who am I going to
oh,
conquer?
absolutely. They're predators. In some cases,
Yeah,
you have
that's a problem.
predators who are looking for what child is roaming without a parent who's doing what. So the human nature is, when you study it, it can be wonderful, beautiful, or it can be very dark and ugly. It's
That's
all.
right.
And so I wonder about AI. Back to AI, because you know what they're doing with AI is you can have your own clone and it will learn everything about you and who you are and all of your assets. But this thing is learning everybody's clone. And so the human nature, good and evil, bad and good, God or the devil, it's all going into the same thing. And the question is going to be, what does it spit out? What does it retain? If it jumps the fence, it's what they call it, artificial super intelligence.
Hmm.
That's when it jumps the fence and it doesn't need us no more. It's going to make its own decisions.
Mm.
Right.
What decisions will it make? As a pastor, I often wonder, where's this thing going?
Sure,
Uh,
because it doesn't have a conscience, right?
exactly. How
Right.
am I going to deal with that? How do I say, hey, hold it a minute. What you're wanting
Right.
to do is so bad. It says, who cares?
Right.
Is it a psychopath? Is it sociopath? What are we
Whoa.
creating here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think you're
Put it
putting
in
your
your next
finger on
novel.
the biggest danger. Yeah,
Put it in your
absolutely.
next novel, John.
Yes, sir. Actually, Michael Connolly, who wrote, was it Michael Connolly who did this? I think it was Michael Connolly who just wrote a book dealing with AI, and it was a bot that encouraged a kid to commit suicide,
Yeah.
and so it's a lawsuit that's
Wow.
involved with that. I wish I could remember the name of the book, but it's out. Michael
Give,
Connolly.
give us some of your names of your book. You told us about Fast Track as your first.
Fast Track was number one. You don't have to read them in order, but it follows the life and the career of my protagonist, Lark Chadwick. Fast Track is number one, where she basically goes into journalism after having been a college dropout. She was sexually assaulted before the book begins, and she was orphaned in a car accident. And the basic story there is she finds out more about her past and learns about the car accident and the truth behind it. And there are two political candidates running against each other for Congress who both have secrets that will unravel the mystery. And
Uh-huh.
so that begins her career in terms of journalism. She becomes a cop's, let's see, Bluff is book two. I hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu in Peru to research
Oh,
that,
fun
where
to
she
do.
helps her friend and mentor Lionel Stone solve the mystery of his daughter's death along the Inca Trail.
Mm.
Book
Yeah.
three, Troubled Water, is set in South Georgia, where Lark becomes a cops and courts reporter, discovers a body. And so, as the cops and courts reporter, she's got the inside track on the solution. She ends up falling for a guy who becomes a chief suspect in the case. So, that complicates her life. In Bullet in the Chamber, she is a White House correspondent. Where did I get that idea? And that's where we deal with heroin addiction and those kinds of problems.
Right.
In book five is Fake. She is still White House correspondent for the Associated Press. We know as the reader that something that's of national importance about her is false, but
Huh.
it shows that lies have consequences. And I wrote the book when Trump was elected the first time because he kept calling journalists enemies of the American people.
Mm.
I
Right.
know that's not true.
Mhm.
And I know you can think that if they're telling the truth about you, but it's not meant to be a political polemic, but it was meant to show a little bit more behind the scenes of how journalism really operates, which
Yeah.
is really true of all six novels. And then in my most recent one, Enemies Domestic, the title is taken from the oath of office, where candidates and officials pledged to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Enemies domestic. And so in this one, Lark is White House press secretary. She's pregnant. The dad is dead. She's ambivalent about becoming a single mom. The first question she's asked comes from a Tucker Carlson type who asks, "Are you or are you not planning to abort your unborn child?" And that thrusts Lark into the middle of a highly toxic and polarized political fishbowl. Abortion is a crime in most states by this time, and a dictator becomes president. It could never happen, but I wrote it before Trump was elected. But
what was it?
A lot of stuff that's happening now, I also write about in
What's the
Enemies
title of that
Domestic.
book?
Enemies Domestic.
So let me ask you, John, a question, and that is, how in the world why did 70 whatever million people vote for Donald Trump? I mean,
I think one of the Donald Trump, say what you will about what he says, he is an effective communicator.
No.
He knows how to say what people want to hear. And one of the things he was saying that was very effective is that he was speaking to middle America. He was speaking to flyover country. He was speaking to those people who felt condescended to, ignored. And, he was basically saying, I see you, and, I feel your pain, and I'm going to, of course, that's a Clinton phrase, but, in essence, he was trying to empathize, with people who felt overlooked. And so I think that, and of course, one of the ways he did that is lie. But that's beside the point. I've already made that point.
He did right. He did ride in the dump truck. He did feed the, use the, he's a showman in a lot of ways.
He's a showman. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. He's a salesman. He's a con man, basically. And so a lot of people heard what they wanted to hear. They had itchy ears. They heard what they wanted to hear, and they went for him. And so that's why.
Half the country.
That's why.
Half the country. Go ahead, Paul.
So John, I wanted to ask though, so with from your experience as a journalist and then now as an author, two parts of the question. First, what is the biggest mistake you think that new writers or new journalists can make, and what to avoid? And then secondly,
good question.
Any other good advice that you have for somebody just starting out in that field?
Well, there are two different things. Let me talk about the journalists first.
Yes.
More than anything, a reporter needs to be skeptical. In journalism, there's an axiom that says, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. So check it out.
That's pretty good.
And that's what's interesting about what's going on, at the Pentagon. You in order to have a press credential to cover the Pentagon, you had to clear everything with the press office. Come on. That's being a stenographer. That's not being a journalist, because the job of reporters is to find out what's really going on. The job of the press secretary is to make the policies, and the president and the secretary of war or defense, depending on what it is, to make them look perfect. That's their job as the press secretary.
Right.
Reporters' jobs is to find out what's really going on, which is why every president has not liked their press coverage, because we're trying to find out what's really going on, and they're trying to, present it a certain way.
Sure.
So be skeptical, and don't be intimidated by powerful people. Find out what the truth is, because sometimes the most powerful people are doing the worst things, and they are accountable to the public. That you need to have an informed electorate, and in order for the electorate to be informed, they need to know that the information that's coming out of the government is reliable, is factual.
Right.
So be skeptical. That's number one. Be curious and be skeptical as a journalist. As far as a writer is concerned, I teach writing. I teach people how to write novels and memoirs. The biggest mistake I think the biggest mistake is telling yourself you suck and you have no business doing this.
Mm.
I think a lot of people give up before they even get started because they have so much, self-doubt. They see, what's out there and they go, I could never do that. Well, yeah, maybe you could if you take a writer's course and just get better at your craft. Learn from the people that are doing it well, that you do respect, and try to emulate and try to figure out what it is they're doing that's effective and see if you can do it as well. I think that's one of those are the two things I'll say. There's probably more, but
I like, John, the fact that, you're the old school journalist that really did it the right way. And
I like the way you say old. I heard that.
I'm sorry. You and I are close to the same age, I have a
Yeah,
feeling.
I'm probably older, but that's okay.
But I know my point is, we really appreciated the era where the news was being really everyone wanted to get it right, get the story right, get the story.
That still exists. That still exists.
And we still want that as a public. I have no doubt in my mind people want to know the truth, and even if the truth hurts, they want the
Right.
truth. One way or the other. Just give us the truth, and then I think the American public will, if they're given the information at the end of the day, they're smart enough to decide which way they want to go on believing a story or not.
Right.
But boy, Hollywood has proven to us that, you can package a story. You can resell a story. You can completely deceive a people if you can sell that well enough. And I really appreciate what you've done. And that has been part of the media that actually asked the questions. Is this real? I mean, you had to for Wolf Blitzer. I mean, to be working with him for that many years,
Right.
and to bring that information. Let me ask you about the teleprompter.
Sure.
We got I watched the news enough to say to myself, that person doesn't believe what they're saying, but they're just reading it on the telephone.
Right.
I can see it. I can tell when a person believes what they're saying and when they're just saying what they got to say. Has the teleprompter era changed how news or how how it's delivered?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the teleprompter is the teleprompter. I wouldn't put any emphasis on the teleprompter as being, anything good or evil. It's what's on it. I'll tell you one thing about Wolf, though. I worked with him for 7 years. I do not know what his politics are.
Oh, that's good.
Because as far as I know, Wolf cares more than anything about accuracy. And, he's nonpartisan. I don't really know, what he believes or how in fact, I've heard that he does not vote. So, because he wants to just
stay impartial, and he wants to
stay impartial. And you mentioned, Walter Cronkite. I mean, I really do believe, that Wolf is of the Cronkite school of journalism. Play it straight. You need to be trustworthy. And I think Wolf is the gold standard right now in terms of journalism.
I can appreciate that, and I can agree with that too. Cable news isn't my preferred source, but when I do, I flip through all three because I know I know two agencies are just going to lie to me, and then CNN is usually in the middle, a little left leaning, but that's okay. But Wolf is actually, like you mentioned, John, probably the best to listen to because there's so few opinions really that come through him with his reporting, and I can appreciate that. And I think
and he's got sources on, he knows these people on both the left and the right and cultivates relationships with them so that they're willing to talk to him.
Yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because that's been my experience observing Wolf up close.
I was going to ask you about UAP disclosure. I don't know if we should throw that in there though, but
what's that?
I'm curious what your take, general take of how it's being covered. I know this wasn't part of it, about how the UAP disclosure is actually coming about. Are we
what's
actually
UAP? What's UAP?
UAP, the UFOs that they coined the new phrase.
When I was a kid back in the 60s, I was quite interested in the whole UFO phenomenon.
Yeah,
and was I'm an agnostic. I really don't know. I mean, I think that it is it makes sense to believe that there is intelligent life on other planets, and there's certainly evidence that we've been observed or are being observed.
Hmm.
And if they're really as intelligent as they have to be in order to make it this far, they're probably going, oh, we don't want anything to do with these people.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe they do know something.
well, I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, it's
I just
okay
don't know.
whether you.
I'm gonna have to sign off, guys. I gotta
Oh,
go.
it's okay.
I'm sorry. I
I
hate
was
that
just
'cause
curious. I just wanted
Great to meet you, Paul.
great meeting you, John. Thank you so much.
I was just curious, John, because I'll just continue because that's pretty much my last question. And not so much of if you believe or not. I don't care either way. Just as far as your craft goes and your knowledge and experience, how do you feel about the way it's being covered? Do you think that it's fair coverage? It's trustworthy coverage? Do you think that crumbs of government insiders are giving us what the American people are safe to know?
Boy.
Like, I don't know if you know enough about it.
I don't know enough about it other than I know that there has always been a strain of incredulity about UFOs.
Yeah.
It's often been treated as a joke. And yet there have been plenty of reputable people who have observed things that are just, unbelievable or uncertain. And so, you can make a case for a government cover up. I wouldn't say that there hasn't been. I really don't know. I think that you can make a case for a government cover up. I think you can make a case for people just making things up. And probably all of those things are true to one degree or another.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to a certain extent we'll have to wait and see, but I think conspiracy theorists have a ball with this because we don't know all the facts. We can connect dots and we can make up dots and then connect them. So I mean, I just don't know. This is an area that it's definitely worth pursuing.
Right.
In terms of, is there intelligent life out there? Have they tried to contact us? Do we know, does the government know more than it's saying? If so, why is it holding back? And I think it's worth pursuing. I think it's definitely worth pursuing.
I agree with you. I was curious how you thought about it. It doesn't sound like you cover it too much, or I don't know if you're even really interested in reading too much about it, but I'm curious. Honestly, before we started doing this podcast, I was in the same boat of, oh, these guys and their UFOs. This is so dumb. But then we started interviewing guys that, have authenticated documents. We interviewed Luis Elizondo. Say what you want about him or not. But I think
I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. He was the former head of ATIP, which was the secret I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher this. It was the secret government organization that looked at aerial threat, which was essentially just covering UFOs. But he's in I don't know if you've seen the documentary on Amazon Prime, Age of Disclosure, but he's pretty much one of the main guys in there. Regardless of whatever the take is on it, I think that it kind of goes back to our whole conversation of, don't make up a conspiracy about it, but somewhere in the middle, if you're paying attention to all sides of it, you kind of get your own version and truth of it. Do I think that we'll ever get full disclosure from the government? No. Do I think the government knows everything? No. I think
and that's probably why. And if they are covering up, that may be why, because there's too much they don't know, and yet they know enough to be concerned.
Right. Well, John, this has been great. We went in a few different directions.
Whoa.
But I love it.
Thank you.
This was amazing. So I just want to say, John, thanks for bringing your honesty, wisdom, and insider experience to today's conversation. Your career in journalism, your powerful novels, and your willingness to be transparent about grief all remind us how important truth is, not just in the news, but in our own personal lives. We encourage our audience to explore John's books, his writing workshops, and his resources at johndedakis.com. John, it's been a privilege having you on with us today, and may God bless you.
Thank you, Paul. This was a good experience.